Hey there, Bruce, and welcome to Remember 11, the Age of Infinity. I promised at the end of the Silver Case that we would do Remember 11 next, and that day has finally arrived. This is going to be probably a long one. If you remember Ever 17, it was a long one. I'm only going to do half-hour episodes as well because I just don't have time to do full-hour episodes for every episode, unfortunately, so it's going to take quite some time. But without further ado, settle in. Let's get into it, shall we? I know it's a quadrilogy. Ever 17 is the only one I ever played, and I don't know if like there's returning characters or anything. I don't know anything. I'm going in completely blind, so okay. I'm a seagull. These are the words uttered by the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova. All alone aboard the former Soviet Union's spaceship Vostok 6, floating in the void of space, a place of complete silence and emptiness, with a hollow feeling of isolation upon her. Yet still able to draw the parallel between herself and a seagull to express the liberating feeling of breaking free from everything. I am a seagull. Such beautiful words. If it were me, I'd never been able to come up with something so clever. I'd probably try being sarcastic and say that I'm a girl trapped in a cage. Though, if you think about it, would that really be sarcasm? A lonely girl locked away inside a tiny, narrow cage? Right now, I'm somewhere as close to heaven as I'll ever be. "33,000 feet up in the air. January 11th, the first day. Is that why it's called Remember 11? Because January the 11th? Interesting. Also, I haven't looked at this stage. I haven't looked up a walkthrough or a guide or anything like that. Like usual, because it'll have multiple endings, it'll be difficult to find which one we want to get to. I'll run through the game in its entirety, blind, and then after that, I'll use a guide to get to each of the endings so as to not waste too much time. Who's that behind you? Suddenly the world around me disappears. Someone from the seat behind me has covered both my eyes with their hands. Who's that behind you? Who's that behind you? Oh, we get choices already. Okay. I think I've set it to autosave whenever there's a choice. Sorry about that. But let's just make sure, shall we? Okay, it's a bit buggy, I think, but okay. Who, I wonder? Who could it be? I wonder who it is. Who do you think it is? No one's traveling with me on this flight. I boarded this plane by myself. I don't have the slightest idea. Judging by the voice, which was still undergoing the changes of puberty, it could only be the boy sitting in the seat behind me. The palms that covered my eyes were pretty small. It's useless, I give up. I raised both my arms and spun around my wrists playfully. Are you sure you give up? Yep. Well then, I guess I'll just have to tell you. The correct answer was... Heaven is here? Kusuda Yuni. Turning around, I found, as I had expected, a boy who looked to be about elementary school age. He was leaning over the headrest with an innocent smile. Kusuda Yuni is what he said. I didn't remember hearing that name anywhere, nor having ever seen his face. I see. Yuni-kun, is it? That's a cute name. Thanks. My friends often tease me by calling me Unishiro or Unit Bath, though. His shyly smiling face was friendly and charming. Hey, Oni-chan? Can I sit next to you? The seat is free, right? I took a glance at my wristwatch. There was still a lot of time before we'd reach our destination. Come on over. I patted the seat by the window. The boy who had introduced himself as Uni pounced into the seat beside me, as suddenly as in a game of musical chairs where the music had stopped. Hey, there was something I was curious about. Do you mind if I ask? What is it? When you were singing the Kagame song earlier, you sang Yauke no Ban, Evening Lit by the Dawn, right? If I remember correctly, I think that part should be Tsukyo no Ban, Evening Lit by the Moonlight. Evening Lit by the Moonlight? Right, because evening lit by the dawn doesn't really make much sense, does it? When it's dawn, the sun rises in the east, and at night, the sun sets in the west, right? So that's the way you sang it when you were a kid, Oni-chan. I'm going to assume it's auto-saving, like I asked it to. Man, I can't do it. Alright. Let's go with that. Yep. I gave a confident nod. But I think evening lit by the dawn is how it should be. Yuni said so while picking at the chipped nail in one of his fingers, because after that the next lines go Tsuruku Tokame, crane and turtle, Ushido no showman, right behind you, in front of your back, right? Dawn and evening, crane and turtle, the back and the front. They're all two things that make up a pair by being the opposites of one another. Light and shadow, yin and yang, male and female, imaginary numbers and real numbers. This whole world is made up of elements that contradict each other, but at the same time need to coexist with one another. I think that's what the Kagame song is trying to say. That's why evening lit by the dawn would be much more fitting there than evening lit by the moonlight. I see. I groaned without noticing. All that being said, my interpretation may not be completely correct. That song still has many mysteries to it. Mysteries? What kind of mysteries? Well, let's see. For example, just what does Kagame mean? What is the symbolism behind of the bird within the cage? Why did the crane and the turtle slip? Did they have to slip? And then there's the who's that behind you? As he hummed that phrase, Yuni took off his glasses. He covered his eyes with his own hands and turned around. Right now I can't see anything at all. They say that out of all our senses, sight is responsible for 8/10 of all the information that we humans gather, you know. That means that right now I'm only capable to feel a mere 2/10 of everything that's occurring around me with my other senses. The remaining 80% is left vague and unclear. I have no way of knowing what Oni-chan's doing behind me right now, or what kind of expression she has on her face. Right now, Oni-chan's existence is one of many unknowns to me. Until I open my eyes and turn around, what's behind me is still undecided. Just as Yuni was unable to see my face, I was unable to see what kind of expression he had on his. I was only able to see his back. A small back. How old are you anyway? After a slight pause, I asked him that. 11. Yuni turned around with his eyes still covered. Then he peered at me through his fingers. Thank goodness that you're here. His cheeks lift into a broad smile as he laughs. His smile was certainly that of an 11-year-old. Straining my ears, I could still hear the sound of the wind. Outside, the snow was still blowing violently about. I held my breath as I stood in front of an iron door. Beside the door, a small red light was blinking in the darkness. The card reader that controlled the lock on the door, the treacherous red light gave away its location. I put my hand in my pockets and pulled out a single keycard. Satoru Yukido. 133. Well, we don't need to read the number. I traced the engraved letters with my fingertip. Yukido Satoru. That's my name. I haven't ever really liked that name very much. I twirled the card in my fingers and spun it around. I inserted it into the reader's slot and let it slide through. The light on the card reader turned green. The lock opened and the door opened, just the slightest crack. I pushed it open and stepped into the darkness as if drawn by something. Kokoro is 20, isn't she? And that's what he said right after I introduced myself. I told him my name, Uyukawa Kokoro, and then had a little chat with him about the place of our destination. However, I hadn't given him any hints or clues that would help him to guess my age like that. How do you know? Impressed? Yuni threw his head back on the seat and made a sound with his nose. Maybe I'm psychic. Come on, stop playing around and tell me. Let's see. I can tell you, but in exchange I have a favor to ask. A favor? You see, I'm not really good with the zoom. Zoom? There's a part where it goes zoom, right? Huh? Well, you know, right? When the airplane begins to land, it descends rapidly with a zoom, and there's a point where you feel light, as if gravity disappears. Ah, well, yes, and? So when the plane starts descending, Looking at me with upturned eyes, Yuni continued, "Would you hold my hand?" Unconsciously, I burst out laughing. However, the expression on Yuni's face was so serious that making fun of him just didn't seem right. Even though his words at times showed wisdom beyond his years, inside he was still just a child. Well, if that's all it is, then be my guest. Really? That being said, there aren't many boys that are allowed to touch me as they please, you know. So be grateful. I gave his head a little poke, and then he blushed as he jumped into my arms. Oh well. So what's the answer? You're about to tell me how you knew my age, right? Yes, well. When he said that, Yuni let go of my sleeve and stretched his arm behind my head. It's this. This was stuck on Kokoron's hair, so in his hands is a fluttering object, which he presented to me. The object Yuni was holding between his fingers was a small white feather, as light and soft as down. R's section's small, spiraling stairs continue higher and higher up. Is this the staircase from Ever 17? I swear this is... Wait. No. This looks like the staircase from, fucking... Route Double. Looks like the staircase from Route Double. I felt as if I was walking up the scales of a giant constrictor snake. A constrictor snake which had wrapped itself around a huge column as it desperately tried to strangle it. Its iron scales made sharp, cold sounds as my feet continued on their journey. And David played with his hand, as at other times. And there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, "I will smite David, even to the wall with it." I didn't think of the words coming out of my mouth as my own. It was as if some spirit was whispering them into my ear. I will smite David, even if he avoided it twice. The entrance I was looking for was near. Thankfully, this constrictor I was making my way up on didn't have a head. Perhaps before it could finally strangle its prey, its head was cut off. The cogwheels of the clock tower made an eerie noise. Rattle, rattle. It sounded as if a spell was being cast, one to take control over time for all eternity. A feather? Yep, a feather. This was in my hair? Yes, it was on the back of your head. I had no idea why a feather would be there. Or how that would tell them that you were 20. Kokoron, you didn't take a bath yesterday, did you? Hey, that's quite rude of you, you know. And for your information, I'm pretty sure I did take a bath yesterday. That's a lie. And why would I lie about something like that? Because Kokoron's eyelids are a little swollen. It's from a lack of sleep, isn't it? Saying that, Yuni took out a mirror from his pocket and placed it right in front of my face. Right? Just as Yuni had said, my eyelids showed a slight tinge of red. It was true that I didn't get much sleep last night. Last night I was in a rush to prepare for this trip, and before I could meet her, I wanted to fill my head with as much information as possible. When I finally got to bed, the sky was already growing light. Well, it's a fact that I didn't get much sleep, but how did this and that have anything to do with one another? How's my lack of sleep related to the feather, or to my age for that matter? Now, don't rush me. I'll explain everything in order, okay? Yuni snapped the folding mirror shut and slipped it back into his pocket. First off, let's confirm the date. Today's date is what day of what month of what year? It's January 11th, 2011, Tuesday. Okay. Then what day was it yesterday? January 10th, Monday. Coming of age day? Yep. Now then, that's where this feather comes in. Yuni said as the feather danced in the palm of his hand. When girls put on their kimono for the event, they wear shawls over their shoulders too. Of all the materials used to make shawls, the most popular is the feather of the white goose. And so, the feather I'm holding in my right hand now is most likely... I don't need to say any more, do I? In other words, I wore a shawl over my kimono when I was attending my coming of age ceremony yesterday. And it was then that the feather came off the shawl and got attached to my hair. The coming of age ceremony is like a big event where you invite all your friends from elementary school and middle school to meet up, right? Where you find out that your first crush is now so homely you don't even recognize them, and that the plainest girl in class has become beautiful enough to make you jealous. Anyway, one chance encounter is followed by the next. You learn many surprising things, everyone's emotions get stirred up, and energy fills the air. It's not hard to imagine being swept up by that wildly exciting atmosphere. Being carried along in a buoyant mood like that. So as the ceremony was coming to an end, you went to an after party with another group of close friends. You'd also finally reached the age where you could drink alcohol legally too, right? When the first after party's over, it's on to the second, and then the third, and then the fourth, and before you know it, the sun is rising in the eastern sky. The result, not enough sleep, red eyelids, and no time to even take a shower. Kokoro, with a feather still stuck in her hair, was rushing to get on this plane at the last moment. So what do you think? I got all of it right, didn't I? Hearing all those statements in such quick succession left me feeling embarrassed long before I fully noticed it myself. Yuni's eyes were sparkling and his cheeks were flushed with red. It's amazing how far you took this wild delusion based on a single feather. Delusion? This isn't a delusion at all. It's an extremely logical deduction. I see, so you're quite confident, aren't you? I guess. I mean, it sounds pretty logical to me. However, that extremely logical deduction is actually, unfortunately, completely wrong. Huh? Because I was actually born in February. I had my coming of age ceremony last year. As soon as I said those words, Yuni's eyes opened wide, leaving two little dots where his cheerful, saucer-like pupils had been before. His mouth was left half open in shock. That's a lie. Then what about this feather? What about the feather? Why was the feather stuck in your hair? Who knows? Who knows, you say? Well, after all, we are high above the clouds here. It might just be an angel's feather, you know? An angel? Murmuring that in wonder, Yumi turned to look out the window, looking for an angel, I suppose. His flustered appearance resembled that of a lively puppy that had just come face to face with a robot dog and was all the cuter for it. I couldn't help but giggle quietly to myself. My laughs reached Yuni's ears and his neck tensed up. There's no way angels could exist. Is that so? It is. Well, either way, it's much more romantic than the goose feather explanation, right? So to decide whether something is true or not, you just check with yourself to see if it's romantic or not, and if you like what you end up with, then you believe in it? Once in a while, I guess. So having a logical basis for something doesn't even matter. Come on, I did say once in a while, didn't I? If there's a logical explanation for something, then I'll believe it. But if there isn't one, I will choose the most romantic option? Pretty much. With a blank look on his face, Yuni gazed absent-mindedly at the feather in his palm. He was utterly still, as if his soul had gone somewhere else and left his body frozen in place. Hey, Kokoro, is it alright if I keep this feather? His eyes were downcast, only his lips were moving. Sure, but what are you going to do with it? It'll be a memento. Memento? When I asked that, Yuni raised his head. Yes, a memento. So that I don't ever forget that I met Kokoro. It surprised me how he said those words so casually. It must have been his age. The brutal, straightforward frankness that boys my age just don't possess, or rather, that they gradually lose with age. Yuni still hasn't lost that gift. If Yuni had been 7 years older, that short exchange of words would have left me so embarrassed and flustered that I'd have to stand up from my seat to cool off, because those simple words would have not been so incredibly romantic. But right now, I simply chose to say, "Oh, how cute." Without warning, I hugged Yuni and messed up his smooth hair with my hands. I can't breathe. I'm dying. Seriously, I'm dying here. And more importantly, my glasses. You break my glasses. They'll break, I'm telling you, they'll break. Save me, anyone. Stewardess. Yuni struggled like a cute little woodland creature in my arms. There was a snowstorm outside. The snowstorm was so strong I had to lean with my hand against the wall to keep standing upright. I used my other hand to shield my eyes from the wind and the snow. It was freezing. I almost strained my eyes trying to stare across the distance. I couldn't see anything. The entire landscape before me had been whited out. A pure white world where all depth was lost. It snatched away my sense of perspective, and I suddenly lost my footing and slipped. I clung to the wall with both hands to regain my balance. The clock tower was over 15 meters tall. If I were to fall from that height, I'd be very lucky if I were to get away with just a few broken bones. I glanced downward. My field of vision was filled with whirling plumes of snow and the needle-like tracks it left as it blew across the roof. Lovely weather we're having. The words of cynicism I spouted were quickly carried away with the wind. There in the freezing cold, I checked the time. I've never liked having anything attached to my arm, so my wristwatch was hidden away in my pocket. My eyes turned toward the panel of the digital watch. It's almost 4 p.m. It's almost time. I raised my eyes to the dark, restless sky. For an instant, a pale light cut through the heavens. The sound of the winter thunder shook my body to its core. The weather continued to worsen. There were no signs of the snowstorm easing up anytime soon. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently experiencing some turbulence and kindly request that all passengers return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. We'll be feeling the tremors from the turbulence in just a little while, but please rest assured this will not affect the safety of the flight. Yuni neither noticed the seatbelt sign nor paid any attention to the captain's announcement. He was next to me, completely immersed in play fighting with a plush polar bear. Acha! Brazilian high kick. Brazilian high kick. A Brazilian high kick? It can only be Amara com Martello? I fastened a seatbelt for him. Even then, Yuni continued to play without paying attention to me. Well, I guess he's fine. I thought it'd be alright to leave him as he was. There was something I wanted to do before we landed. I took out a thick file from my bag. I fastened my own seatbelt and laid the file in my lap. The cover read, Iwazumi Municipal Hospital, Indiscriminate Murder, Case File. I opened it to the first page. Wednesday, January 14th, 2009. This gruesome incident had taken place in the winter of 2009, 2 years ago. The scene of this tragedy was Iwazumi Municipal Hospital in Hokkaido. It was a 300-bed facility, well known as the most reliable general hospital in that area. The time was 4 a.m. Powdery snow fluttered down from the pitch-black night sky. Dawn was still a long way off, and the neighborhood was deserted and silent as death. Only the whispering of the falling snow reverberating from somewhere far away broke the perfect silence. The figure of a lone girl had appeared at the front gate of the city hospital. She was not holding an umbrella. The powdery snow fell softly onto her shoulders and her hair. She was as silent as the world around her. An on-duty nurse noticed this strange figure from the window of the third floor. The nurse thought that there might have been an emergency and quickly rushed down toward the main gate, but once she got there, her figure was nowhere to be seen. The hospital was sound asleep. There was no groaning in agony, no one weeping in despair. Only the faint sounds of calm and tranquil sleep filled the cool hallways. A sharp shriek that violated the silence. That's when it all began. The only voices that could be heard thereafter were agonizing, dying screams, and then everything lapsed again into silence. It took the doctors and nurses several minutes to notice that something was wrong. The nurse call signs lit up one by one, and then the alarm sounded echoing throughout the hospital. The on-duty doctors split up and rushed to the sick rooms. Screams and cries echoed here and there from room to room, from ward to ward, one after another. The patients rushed out of their rooms barefoot. They ran, jumbled together, trying to escape, making incomprehensible sounds. A sobbing girl, a ranting and raving young man, an old woman who stood stock still, covered in blood. In the twinkling of an eye, the hospital fell into a state of panic resembling purgatory. A lone doctor opened the door to find one of the hospital rooms. An incredible amount of fresh blood stained the walls and the linoleum floor crimson. A thin mist of splattered blood hung in the air. The sickening, persistent odour made its way to the doctor's nose and settled itself deep in his lungs. The doctor instinctively covered his mouth. Two motionless lumps of flesh lay there sprawled over the beds. One had its chest brutally torn open. The right half of the ribcage was sticking out from the body cavity. The heart was gone. He found it in the corner of the room, squished flat like a frog that had been run over by a truck. As if someone had hurled it at the wall in a fit of rage. The heart had left a vivid streak of bright red on the milky white wall as it slid its way down to the floor. Suddenly, someone grabbed the doctor's leg. It was another male patient. The patient's throat had been slashed open. The weak, rasping sound of air escaping from the wound could be heard. Shocked, the doctor knelt down and firmly covered the patient's neck with his hands. Male patient. The shadow. The shadow has come. Those would be the last words he'd ever say. To this day, no one has been able to determine what those words really meant. According to the report, the first murder occurred near the entrance to the emergency wards. The victim was a male security guard. He was most likely killed trying to detain the perpetrator who had invaded the hospital. Thereafter, the perpetrator went from one hospital room to another, indiscriminately slaughtering patients along the way. The patients listed as murdered even included an elementary student. The patients, however, were not the perpetrator's only victims. The doctors and nurses who attempted to capture were also stabbed. The final casualty count was 12 dead, 19 wounded. The final criminal act was committed 30 minutes after the first victim was murdered. The perpetrator was cornered by the police on the rooftop and arrested. The murder weapon was described as a large pair of industrial scissors. To be precise, it was only half a pair of pinking shears. The perpetrator used only one of the blades to commit the murders. The other blade was never found even after a thorough search carried out by the police at the hospital and the perpetrator's home. The motive for the crime remains unknown. While in custody, the perpetrator remained silent throughout the whole of the investigation, never responding to the questions of the police or public prosecutors. However, a single phrase alone was spoken, one which could be considered something of a clue. Right before her arrest, she had muttered something as she dropped her blood-stained blade. Where is Self? Those are the details of the Awazumi Municipal Hospital indiscriminate murder case. Her name was Inubushi Kaiko. Her age at the time of the incident? 17. She was 19 now. Even though she was a minor, a crime so brutal would normally result in a severe penalty, which she would have had no way of avoiding. However, her circumstances differed from the norm. In the end, she was found innocent. The final verdict of the administration of justice stated that Inubushi Kaiko was suffering from DID, dissociative identity disorder. That is to say, multiple personalities. Penal Code Article 39. Those suffering from insanity will not be prosecuted. Those who are mentally handicapped will receive a lighter sentence. She is currently being held for observation at a certain medical facility. Specified Psychiatric Hospital for Isolation and Aegis. Alias, SPHIA. Like sphere? That is my journey's destination. I got on this plane for the purpose of meeting her. Inubushi Kaiko. No matter how many times I read that file, it always makes me shiver inside. I guess if you chose to major in criminal psychology, it'd be necessary to accept the reality of what happened objectively and calmly. But the emotions that were burning within my chest weren't something I could easily suppress without any hesitation. That girl had killed many innocent people in the cruelest, most perverse ways imaginable. She'd even taken the lives of innocent children who had never harmed a single soul. No matter how crazy she was, I couldn't just bring myself to forgive her for what she'd done. To be honest, I was filled with an intense hatred for Inubushi Kaiko. Dondun Bakan, yeah, okay. The elementary school student murdered back then was just 9 years old. If he was still alive, he'd be right around Yuni's age now. That thought made my chest lighten as I watched Yuni play on innocently. In the corner of the room, engulfed in darkness, a young girl sat on the floor, hugging her knees. Her tiny back trembled ever so slightly. She was sobbing quietly. A young boy put his hand on her shoulder. She glanced up at the boy with her tear-filled eyes and flung herself into his arms, embracing him tightly as if afraid he'd disappear the moment she let go. I'm scared. I'm so scared. She kept crying as she held onto him with all her strength. The boy gently ran his fingers through her hair. It's okay. He whispered softly into her ear. There's nothing to be afraid of, because no matter what happens, I'll be here to protect you. No, that's not it. The words left her trembling lips as she nervously shook her head. What I'm afraid of is myself. The person I'm afraid of is myself. Still, I'll protect you forever. You'll see. That's impossible. There's no way you could. Because I'll... His slender fingers dug deep into the boy's back. I'll kill you too. Abruptly, there was an unexpected noise, and then the inside of the plane lost gravity. The file on my lap slowly floating into the air before me, pages fluttering as if to take off, and then fell from mid-air with a thud, as though tired and gasping for air. But before I could recover, the file crashed abruptly to my feet. The plane felt like it was drifting on ice. As soon as that thought crossed my mind, the plane was once again pulled down with a frightening strength, as if it wanted us to take us into the bowels of the earth. Screams could be heard from every direction, whenever the cabin shook. And mingled with the screams, an undercurrent of fear saturated the air. Kokoro, I'm scared. Yuni clung to my chest, tightly to my chest. I placed my arm around her shoulder and tried to calm him down. You know what? Last year, over a period of just 365 days, you know how many people died in traffic accidents in Japan? Nearly 1,000. Earthquakes, typhoons, lightning bolts, and avalanches took 128 lives. The number of people who die every year from accidents at sea is over 1,000. The average number of people who are murdered is 1,250. So, compared to that, the chances of an airplane getting in an accident and crashing are 0.0001%. Do you understand what that means, Uni-kun? In short, being in the air is much safer than staying down on the ground. Well, did that calm me down? Uni didn't reply. He simply buried his face into my chest as he trembled all over. So no, then. That's going to be a no. And with that, we're going to wrap up episode 1 here, because we're out of time for today. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. We'll be back tomorrow with more Remember 11. I'm very excited to see where this goes. Thanks for watching, Bruce. I'll see you tomorrow.